Go ahead and get going. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the AIA Austin WiA Motherhood Panel for 2026. My name is Danielle Smith, and I am the 2026 AIA Austin WiA Chair. And with me is our wonderful our Chair-elect, Tuba Jalal. Also on the call, we have our Motherhood Initiative Subcommittee Chairs, Nasala and Jen. Before we get started and we jump in to any WiA event, I want to remind everyone of the mission for AIA Austin WiA, which is to promote, validate, and illuminate the role of women within the architectural field through fostering community, fellowship, education, and outreach. To make achieving this mission possible in 2026, we owe an immense gratitude to all of our wonderful committee sponsors. Those include Anderson Windows, Bespoke Careers, Feeder, Contour Collective, Ferguson Home, Cook McIntyre Construction, McKinney York Architects, Michael Shue Office of Architecture, Moon Tower, Page Now Stantec, ProSource, Rogers O'Brien, SOM, and Word & Carr. In addition, we'd like to thank our in-kind sponsors, Gus Bernal, Film, Photo, and Education, and Miller Imaging and Digital Solutions. With that, I wanted to hand it over to our wonderful Motherhood Initiative Subcommittee Chair, Nasala, to introduce today's panel.
Good afternoon. Welcome to AIA Austin WiA Motherhood Panel 2026. If this is your first time you're attending an AIA Austin WiA event, welcome. We are very glad that you are here. Please follow AIA WiA and sign up for our newsletter or follow us on social media to find out what events are coming up. It's all in newsletter, Instagram, LinkedIn, Linktree. Q&A will take place at the end of this panel. Please drop any questions you may have and chat throughout the panel discussion. The panel will address as many questions as possible following the conversation. Saying all that, I would like to hand over the mic to our panel moderator, Laura.
Thank you, Nasala. I'm Laura Burton. I'm an interior designer here in Austin. And I have to admit that when they first asked me to be the moderator, I did not feel like I was qualified because my kids are much older than any of your kids, I'm guessing. So my kids are 34, 29, and 25. But in talking with the panelists and the committee, I started realizing, you know what, this whole thing is a journey and mothers encounter challenges. The whole situation evolves with every phase of a child's life. And so now that my children are adults, it is a different phase of life, but it all still applies. So in terms of my involvement in the Austin Build community, so I started at the UT School of Architecture in the 1980s. I graduated in 1989. I worked for some architects while I was in school, and then when I graduated, it was a depressed market. So I pivoted and did a sidestep into high tech doing semiconductor design at Motorola. So I had that little corporate stint. I will admit that the corporate life was where I started realizing the push-pull challenges of motherhood and working full-time. And corporate life did not afford me the flexibility that I decided I really wanted for my family. So I had my kids while I was at the corporate world and then decided that when they started school and extracurricular activities, and I was really struggling to juggle it all. And so I left Motorola and started my own business in 2004. So I've been doing interior design for 22 years. I do feel that basically, so as a business owner, there's a lot of responsibilities, but it also afforded me the flexibility that I wanted. And so I have a fabulous team around me, a team of designers who I trust implicitly, and that has really given me the flexibility that I need. So I will say nowadays I still do architecture, but it's mostly remodel type architecture. The scopes are just way too small for any of the architecture firms in town to want to touch, but when people want to like remove a wall and expand a footprint and some of that type of stuff. So we do a lot of permitting. We manage all the selections, everything from the beginning of the project to the end of the project, from the, selecting flooring and tile and lighting and plumbing to furniture and draperies and all of that kind of stuff. So that's what we do nowadays. So I would like to introduce our panelists. And so Brett, do you mind introducing yourself and telling us a bit about yourself?
Sure. Hi everyone. I'm Brett Greig. I am a licensed architect, but actually switched over to construction 12 years ago now. Yeah, 12 years ago now. And I am the head of construction with Rouser Construction, which is actually a new title for me this year. So it's been fun to keep evolving in this role as a woman in construction. Um, I have twin daughters, Lottie and Thea, who are 13. And my husband is also in architecture. So we like to keep it close. We met in grad school. Um, but yeah, having my daughters definitely contributed greatly to my transition from architecture to construction. So we'll hopefully have a chance to talk about that a little bit more as we're getting the conversation going.
Thank you, Brett. Caitlin, how about if you'll introduce yourself?
Hi everyone. My name is Caitlin Terwelp. I'm an interior designer here at WRA. Um, for most of my career, I've been in kind of the K through 12 higher education design realm. So even when I graduated college, it was my the first firm I worked for. I got my little internship there, and that just evolved, and I've grown to really, really love the education area, design realm. It really is rewarding. Um, and then I have three kids, Tula, who is 6, and Rory, who is 4, and Killian, who is 19 months, 18 months, 19 months. He'll be 2 in October. Um, but it's busy like everyone says it is. And when I had them, I ended up stopping, not working at a firm anymore, and started my own business. And that was really great. And I needed all the flexibility. But now I'm back working at a firm, and it's been great.
Thank you, Caitlin. I'm looking forward to hearing your answers to the questions. And Christina, if you'll introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm Christina Martin. I am a licensed landscape architect. I worked for a firm about 8 years, and then I ended up making the choice to stay home when I had my daughter. And I have one kid, and she is now 15, not quite driving, so we're still pretty busy. Um, that'll be nice when she can drive, but scary. As I said, I stayed home with her, and then when she started middle school, I ended up going back to work at the same firm. And I have worked full time there for several years, part time. I'm actually at the moment part time and kind of just transitioning, handing off projects. Um, and then in between, I wouldn't really say that I ran a business. I did small projects for people I knew, probably maybe as many as half a dozen in 10 years. So not a lot. Um, but just different things over different changes in our family. So that's it.
Thank you, Christina. Heather, you're the last panelist to introduce yourself. Can you tell us about you?
Yes, for sure. My name is Heather Banks. I am co-owner of Carrie Paul Studios with my husband, Mike. We started the company about 10 years ago, and we do infill, real estate, residential, new construction, and remodels and additions. We aren't architects, but we hire architects, and we do the project management, construction, and I do all the interior finishes for all of our projects as well as staging, and I'm a real estate agent as well. We have 3 kids. Maisie is 9, the youngest. Cash is 12, and Zoe is 15. And Christina mentioned driving, and I can tell you that it is scary because my 15-year-old just started driving. But it's also fun to watch them kind of learn that. So I'm in the thick of it with three kids at three different elementary schools right now. I've always been completely self-employed, never worked for a firm. So I can give probably a perspective to anyone who has maybe always been self-employed as well and trying to navigate how to do that and manage a family as well.
Thank you, Heather. So that's the four panelists, and then we have four questions outlined. So I'm going to kind of mention what each question is and then have someone get started with answering that question. So the first question we have is, what were your expectations going into pregnancy and how did reality differ, both professionally and personally? And Christina, do you mind tackling that one first? And then we'll all chime in.
I can start. Excuse me. And I didn't really wait, let's see, which of these questions? There were a couple
Oh,
about.
sorry, it was the one about expectations going into pregnancy and how reality differed.
Okay. Is there a separate question? Let me get my brain straight. Sorry. Real quick about that.
Oh, no, it just said
All right.
professionally and personally.
Okay. And that was the one I didn't really, I think I was very open to, I didn't know what my expectations were going to be. We both prepared, talked to a lot of daycares and was looking into nannies and kind of figuring out where what we would be doing if I continued working full time. And then also just being open to the fact that, well, am I going to want to stay home? Am I going to want to say, oh, I need to go to work and get away from the small child, or am I going to want to stay home? And so I didn't really have, I think my expectation, instead of saying I had an expectation, I was going to be open to how it turned out. And at the end of 3 months maternity leave, I did end up making the choice to stay home and not try to work and do motherhood at the same time at that point in my life. So
I think that's a lot of the lesson, right? Is like trying to stay open. Like we have these expectations and then everything changes along the way.
mhm.
But do any of the rest of you have responses to that question or things that you want to chime in with?
I think I'd say for me, my expectations were very off. I really had no idea what to expect, as most of us don't when you're pregnant and trying to figure out what's going to happen. So I think for me, what I ended up needing to do was try to work on having a balance because everything changes once you have a child, and it's hard to go from focusing on your career and your partnership with your significant other if you have one into bringing this child along that needs you at every moment, especially in those early years. So I think for me, my expectations were challenged in that way, and I had to really, really learn how to try to balance business along with taking care of child and childcare and all the components of that. So I think it's a lot of pressure, but it does take some time to work on that balance for me.
Caitlin, how about you?
Um, well, how much time do we have? I think um I think I always wanted to be a mom, so I was really excited when I was pregnant and it was going to be this beautiful thing that happens in the movies and all this stuff. Well, not the case. I was really sick during my pregnancies, but thankfully I was surrounded by other women that I worked with who were like these strong career women working through it every day, which was a blessing because I was able to see how it could work. But it was also confusing for me because I was struggling and I saw them and I said, why aren't they struggling like I am, trying to keep it together? So I think that was a big like misconception for me was, oh, so we have to show up and act like nothing's happening. Like, like we're growing like arms right now and nothing's happening. So I think that was a big difference. Trying to balance work and all of those demands. Gosh, I don't know. I don't want to go on forever. So I think just coming into it, knowing that every day is different and you might not feel good this day, but you might be fine the next would have been nice to know.
And kind of like you mentioned about what we see in the movies, like it's a little bit of a push-pull with us as moms, right? Like we're trying to act like we've got it all together, but then you want the other moms to be able to see and give themselves grace that it's not always going to be perfect like you see in the movies. And so it's tricky
Exactly.
because we all try to act like everything's going perfectly.
Yeah. And I think that's hard as a mom, and if you give other, advice to a new mom or something, you say like, "Oh, it's gonna be fine," because it is beautiful and it is the most honorable, wonderful thing you can have in your life, but it's also really hard. So
Mhm.
it's this balance between like keeping it real and not saying sounding negative, but also saying it's worth it.
Right. True.
So I had kind of a similar experience, but also really, really different because at that point I was still in architecture and in a really small firm that was doing mostly residential, and I was the only woman. And there were, I think, five of us at that point, and the only person who had children was the principal, but his children were a fair amount older. And so I had no model. And I also had like no experience or expectation with like the brain fog that would be present, especially like being pregnant with twins. It was a lot of brain fog and a lot of propped feet all day. And it was also a firm, and I feel like architecture in general in that really design heavy culture is very it's competitive. And it was also just sort of the type of environment where you came in, you want to be the first one in and you want to be the last one to leave. And there were some days where it'd be like 7 o'clock, and I'm like, what, is anyone gonna leave? And I'm just like, I'm so exhausted, I can't do this. And so that was sort of the first clue I had that maybe an environment like this was not going to be the environment that I would go back into after having kids. Or that if I were, what were some of the ways that I was going to be able to like build a little bit more compassion into that environment? I think yeah, that was kind of my experience.
Thank you so much for your feedback on that. And so I'm going to lead into the second question. And I think there's a lot of overlap in all of these. So forgive me if y'all feel like, oh, I didn't already answer that. But so the second question is, what was your experience balancing work demands during pregnancy? So y'all touched on that. And how did your workplace respond? So regarding doctor's appointments, and Brett, you mentioned brain fog, morning sickness, all of those types of things. So Caitlin, do you mind starting off on that one?
Sure. Um, In terms of my workplace, like I said, I was surrounded by really strong career women that were really inspiring. But it was also hard because I was never like denied appointment time or time off or anything like that. But I was, it's like, how many hours can you work? And you're like, oh, how many do you need me to work? And so it was, although I think the the opportunity was there for me to speak up and say, I can't do this. I really need to work 40 hours only, this type of thing. I felt the pressure to be a good team member, make sure my part got done and all of that stuff, which is all just part of the culture and some of the reason why I like being in architecture. It's part of it, but it's hard when you're not feeling good all the time. And then there's the flip side where you go, I got to take care of my body because I got to take care of my kid already. Like you got to make sure your blood pressure is not high. You got to make sure you're eating the right stuff, not too much caffeine. So not only are you monitoring external factors, you're trying to monitor your body too. So I think you're just trying to do a lot of different things at once. And I think being given the grace to struggle through all that would have been like nice, and maybe not just being told like, we got this for you, it's fine, we're family friendly. Maybe it being modeled as we leave at 5 because that's the time we leave, type
Mhm.
of
Mhm.
situation would have been helpful.
Yeah, Brett, it feels like that leads into what you were saying in terms of like looking around at 7 p.m. is like, is anybody going to go home? Like having people model that behavior and not just say that it's acceptable to leave at 5, but then you're the only one leaving at 5, you know?
Right. I mean, there was a small firms discussion I went to a few weeks ago where Hunt Architecture, husband and wife firm, they have a rule when they hire people, they make it really clear you're working in a space behind our house and we shut down at 5:30 every day. And
Mhm.
that's our rule. And that's what we're going to model, that our work is really important. And while you're here, you're very focused. But at 5:30, it stops. I think that's good. I think another way of modeling is just the quality of time off with your families and recognizing that architecture and construction and real estate and landscape, they're all really demanding careers and that valuing a solid like time off vacation policy and having the bosses use it too and not abuse it. But also just being fair across the board and letting people when they are off be off. Not just like, can you answer this email even though you're on vacation? But
Right.
really recognizing that important of being able to focus on your family and not worry about the work.
That's a good reminder for me because I always think about as an owner, like I want to be responsive, but then so I shouldn't be responding all the time, even when I'm gone on vacation, because that's not modeling like great behavior for my employees.
Exactly. Yeah.
I think in some ways, I was just gonna say I had it somewhat easy in that I think it was we weren't overflowing with work. This was right before 2010, and there were some times in my career when I was definitely there 8, 9 late late hours, and at that point, 40 hours was all I was doing, and I didn't have any health issues that required out of the norm as far as having to go take off or bed rest or anything like that. And I actually was really, I had a lot of time to organize my projects and put together a lot of information so that I could be comfortable that if I was going to be out for 3 months, that everything would be under control. So that was nice.
I would say for me, it was a little different since I didn't really have a workplace. It was just myself. And really at that time, it was just myself because my husband hadn't joined to work for us to work together yet. So my challenge, I think, with balancing those demands would have been like more more self-management and self-care because I think when you're an entrepreneur and you're just working for yourself, it's pretty easy to get kind of wrapped up in working as much as possible because you're not getting a regular paycheck necessarily like you might be when you're employed by someone else. So I think that was something I wish I had learned and focused on during my pregnancy and even especially in those early years when, I was trying to balance childcare and really self-care was something I feel like really fell off for me in those early years, pregnancy. And then after that, when I had like two or three kids in diapers at once, I really didn't work on myself at all, exercise, eating healthy all of those things. So I think that's a lesson I learned, which I wish I had really learned sooner, was that it is important, more important than you really think it is.
I think I still struggle with that. The whole, like we talked about, like we inevitably have so many spinning plates and like which at any one time, one of them's going to drop and you just have to like watch it fall and just kind of sit with it and observe it. And I think that that's sort of like, for me, it's always like the exercise and self-care time is what takes a backseat. But something I'm working on as my kids get older, I'm definitely
Yeah,
trying to
it does
take more
help
time.
too when they get older. Yeah, I definitely same. Now that they're not in diapers anymore, I can find more time to work on things like that.
It always reminds me the first time I went on one of those flights where they say like give your air first to yourself and then to your child, and I always thought, wow, that sounds like really rude. And then once I thought about it, I was like, oh yeah, you can't take care of them if you're not doing well. So it was like a good opportunity for me to give myself permission to like look after myself first. So I think that that's really important to think of it that way and to realize it's not being selfish, that you have to just to be able to look after everybody else. So thanks, you guys. Okay, the next question that I have is, in what ways has motherhood changed your schedule, your career trajectory, or your definition of success? And Heather, I have you starting with that. So I know that your path is different than a lot of other people, but it still applies.
I think for me, motherhood changed my sort of my path in for me to become a little bit less of a workaholic. Before pre-kids, I feel like work was all I did. It was work and trying to spend time on in my relationship. And then once I had kids, it was suddenly like, how do I define success when I'm not able to completely 100% be focused on work? So I really had to focus on being more intentional with the time that I had rather than trying to do a million things at once, focusing on the things that I can do and maybe outsourcing some of the things that I couldn't do, especially since it's just me and now my husband. There's a lot of things that, I feel like I should be doing, but also they're not my strengths. So in order to be able to kind of sort of outsource some things and keep some things at home, it allows me to kind of focus on also spending more time with my kids. We have a really strict rule at our house or we try to, that once the kids are home from school, like we kind of try to give our attention to them. So, occasionally there's like texts that come in after hours that I have to answer or emails, but when possible, we really try to focus on giving them our attention so that they feel like that we're not working all the time. And we have to self-manage that since we're not employed. I mean, there's nobody telling me to leave my desk at 5:30 or to stay until 7. So just have to kind of work on that myself.
But to that point, like in a similar way of modeling it for your employees, you're trying to model that for your children.
Yeah, yeah, definitely.
Such a valuable thing to model. Anybody else? How did your career trajectory change, Caitlin? I'm putting you on the spot.
That's fine. I think motherhood has changed my life in so many ways. It's made me slow down over and over and over again. Every time I try to speed up, it's like, oh no, 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 not today. It's completely changed my priorities, but it wasn't instant. I had to really learn that. Um, I could prioritize my kids' needs over my needs any day, just like you guys were talking about. That's no problem. But prioritizing their needs over something that has to get done, maybe for somebody else, is hard. It's hard for me to say no. It's hard for me to know, like, gauge my time. It's just been a real challenge, and I work on it every day. Um, but like, I really want to be the contributing, dependable team member that I was before I had kids. And it's just been hard to shift gears and say, sorry, I can't. I have to leave at this time because I have to pick up my daughter because disappointing my daughter is going to kill me. And, disappointing like somebody else may not like hurt my soul. I might get in trouble, but it's like, it's a little bit different. So it's hard to set those boundaries with myself and be able to say no. Um, and I think like defining my new definition of success is daily. It's really hard for me to set long-term goals. It's more like, was today a good day? Or was today just okay? Maybe tomorrow will be better, maybe it won't. And it's literally, that's what I talk about that's what I mean when I say slow down, because it's day by day, and it still is. It has been since my daughter was born 6 years ago, and it still is today. So maybe someday when they're not little, I'll be able to set more long-term goals, but this is where it's at right now.
Thank you. Go ahead, Christina. Were you about to say something?
Jump in and say, so I became a landscape architect in part because I wanted to have a tangible impact on other people and the spaces they use and, what people improving their lives through these spaces they use. And I think for me, the success is, I can still work on projects, I can still have that impact, but separating that from the idea of, oh, is there a title or was I at a certain level or, because since I did step away from working from so long, So, success isn't necessarily a defined path, but just am I accomplishing that in my work? And also, because I stayed home for so long and then was working part-time, I think I had the opposite. Instead of having to sometimes take away from work and focus only on the kid, I wanted to show her that I was also doing work and to kind of make sure I talk about it and didn't keep that part of my life separate, but to show her, that I can also work and have these projects and, kind of include and make sure she knows what I do instead of just, oh, I worked a little part-time while she was at school and then she never sees me working whatsoever. So kind of showing that. But just one quick story when I was in grad school, and for me, there's, you know, landscape architect is a factor in how I make the world a better place for people. And I was recently married. I would sometimes come home and have dinner with my husband, of all things, or I went off to a wedding. And I had teachers that were very grumpy about that. They said, you should eat, sleep, breathe landscape architecture only. And I'm thinking, no, actually, this is a part of me and how I make the world better for the people. But it's really about people and not only this idea of a design profession. And so I think that a success for me is affecting the world, and just my work is a part of that, but not the only thing that I could use to think of as success. So that's it.
Yeah, I think that's really a valuable lesson to like remind yourself, like, why did I get in this to begin with? And it wasn't about accolades and achieving, certain things. It's like just trying to be mindful of why did I want to do this from the very beginning, and just making sure that you're true to that. I think that's really important, and I appreciate you sharing that.
Yeah. Although I've had people that were very disappointed in me that I didn't work continuously or, didn't talk to me because, I wasn't working. So, having to, where's the value in that? But anyway,
Well, I
I'm
think
okay.
it's overcoming that stereotype that
Yeah.
is where the value is certainly in what you produce, out in the world, not necessarily what you've produced with your family.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's a long, I think I'm still on that journey of kind of like, as kids age and change and as we grow and find ourselves, more experienced in our careers, just how that sense of value changes. Um, my career changed a lot when I was pregnant. Um, those girls zapped my generative design side of my brain. They took every cell and ounce of energy that would go into that, and they took it all. And that's great. I'm happy for them to have it. What was left in its place after I had my girls was my like well, it's project management, but the organizational side of my brain went into overdrive because here I was with these two. I'm so lucky. I mean, I had two very healthy babies, almost to term. Everything was great. But then I was expected to be like keeping track of their feeding schedules and keeping charts and weighing and making sure that everybody was on their growth path. And it was a lot of information, but it sort of set up this like organizational side of myself that I didn't realize was there. And when I did part-time work after they were born, I taught at UT a little bit. I worked for another female architect. Um, and there was a point when my girls were trying to do the math on this. I guess they were about a year and a half. And I had an opportunity to go work in residential construction. The firm I was at, she was going to shut down. She was actually doing a big life pivot as well. And so I ended up going, just taking a chance to be a project manager. It was a residential construction firm. I'd seen their signs out in front of houses that I liked when I was like walking up in the fancy neighborhoods with the strollers and all that. And so I tried it. And what I quickly realized was that the rhythm of construction project management really suited my rhythm of motherhood more too, and that you had the autonomy to, as long as your project was, the schedule was moving along well, you were being productive, the subs knew what they needed to be doing and everything, you could duck out for 2 hours to go, take a kid to a, physical therapy appointment or occupational therapy appointment and come right back and everything would be fine. And it was a real revelation to me of like, no longer was I sticking my head up and comparing, over the computer monitor of like, will anyone notice if I have to sneak out and will they be judging me if I come back in? I could be sort of the queen of my kingdom in some ways. Yeah.
So Brett, that kind of leads us into, I mean, you've talked about what you carved out for yourself in terms of how to give yourself that freedom and flexibility and like finding, maybe it was a pivot as a type of job or but one question that I have is how, and it's the last question here actually, is how can colleagues and leaders better support and advocate for working mothers in a meaningful and sustainable way? And it seems like that builds on what you were just talking about.
Right. I mean, so um, Rouser Construction. So I worked at two residential construction firms, and then in 2019, I Eric Rouser and Rebecca Rouser, they started Rouser Construction, and I was hire number one. And we sat down at a bar and kind of talked about like what are our core values with this company? Who do we want to be? Who do we want to model? What type of people do we want to attract? And we kind of have that check-in now still quite regularly. Um, and some of that definitely comes down to what are the policies that we're going to have for our people. We actually don't track vacation time. We say, this is really hard work. We need you to fully be here when you are here. And in that sense, like if you feel like burnout is coming on, you need to take a vacation and we will cover you. We've got your back. And we had our third hire, we hired her while she was pregnant. And so with her first kid, and it was like, okay, guys, let's go sit at the bar and talk about what is the type of maternity policy that you would have wanted. The Rousers have a daughter as well who graduated from high school on Friday. So, we're all very aware of the importance and the how quickly this phase of our lives goes. The daughter who graduated on Friday. I remember when she was 7 years old, and that doesn't feel like that long ago. So just very aware that we're in a very short chapter of our lives. Anyway, to get back on track, just in some ways, it's like the golden rule, like creating policies in our company that we would want to have for ourselves. And we're doing that now too. We've got two of our male project managers, their partners are pregnant. And so it's like, okay, now we got to talk about, let's go back to the bar and let's talk about what compassionate paternity policy looks like. And it's a conversation and we might not get it right. But we definitely are open to learning from what does go right. The maternity policy ended up that we did was very generous and it almost kind of burned out Eric. And so, we had the conversation of like, what are some ways that we can change internally as a company, not necessarily to take anything away from the mother, but what changes do we need to make inside the company so that the rest of us aren't burning ourselves out?
Yeah, it sounds like the lessons learned and just constantly checking in and staying flexible, and malleable is important for the employer as well as us as moms. So it seems like that's an important part of component to that environment that you're describing.
Right. I mean, every year, the employer has to look at like, oh, the health insurance policies are changing a little bit, and what are available to our employees is going to adjust. That's a great time to also just look across the board at what your policies are on an annual basis and just kind of evaluate what's been working, what hasn't.
Yeah. Caitlin, I'm going to put you on the spot again. That's what you get for sending me an email with ideas. Do you have reactions to that, to what leadership could model better?
Well, I will say since joining the firm I'm at now, it has I joined this firm when I had a lot of unknowns with my littlest son. We had found out that he was deaf and what we were going to do about that. There's a lot of options. So when I interviewed poor boss, I laid it all out for him, and I was like, "This is what's happening," and they took me in anyway. So I I just I appreciate what has been happening here, at least, and it is modeled that time is taken when needed. I feel like I've been given the grace to figure things out, which has been so helpful to say, like, I don't know what's going to happen. I'm doing my best. I promise to be honest with my time, and the grace has been given, and I've appreciated it, because it was much needed to come back into the firm like workforce, and to have that going on was really hard. And I think knowing from owning my own business for those few years, knowing that the bottom line is really important, you're managing people, all of these other things are swirling around of importance, and yet to have that grace for somebody going through something is really great. So I think, and to know that employers are also trying to figure it out. And I would say most employers have families, and they're trying to figure it out, and they're trying to be flexible as much as they can, but they also have to think about their other employees and making sure they're getting a paycheck. So there's a lot on the owners' minds all the time. So I, yeah, I think just it's been great here at least, and just knowing that there's always a lot going on, like with, Brett, and trying to figure out, hey, well, now we have dads and new dads. What are we going to do about that? And let's try it. And if it doesn't work, then we're going to try something else. And that's all you can ask for as an employee, is saying, hey, did it work? Maybe not. Maybe we switch it.
That's such a great message to like not only give grace, like expect grace from the employers, but to also give them grace and realize that they're trying to figure it out too. Like we're all just trying to
Yeah.
figure it out one day at a time.
Yeah. And I think sometimes I think like maybe when you first are pregnant, and you're like, oh, this is the maternity leave policy. This is what it is. This is how it goes. It's very set in stone. Somebody else has it figured out. And when you realize like we're all just trying to figure it out, then things get a lot better.
Heather, how about you as someone running your own business for your family? Like what kind of lessons did you learn about leadership, and what your leaders, or what you could do as a leader differently?
That's a good question. It's a little different, I guess, with being self-employed, and maybe my perspective would be helpful for anyone who is self-employed who is maybe working with subcontractors and vendors who, it's not quite the same as when you're an employee, but sometimes I do feel like, or when you're an employer, but I do sometimes feel like some of these vendors that we've been working with for many, many years, it feels like kind of like they're an employee, even though they're not, because, we work with them very frequently. So I think in that way, giving them some grace on the job site when there is a family issue, or a illness, or a family death, or it doesn't happen often lately, it seems, in our line of work, but if there's a pregnancy, or a lot of times it's the tile guy's wife is pregnant, so he can't be on the job a certain day. So I think for me it's a matter of kind of being understanding, and working with them on communication is important, I think, to determine kind of the best path forward. That's the biggest challenge, I think, a lot of times with people that we work with, is just for them to tell us like what they need, or what we could do better in terms of that, and communicating with them to kind of find resolutions to problems before they happen, or to communicate to figure out what we could do about a project getting delayed because somebody's has a family health issue or something. So I think for me it probably comes down to working on that.
That's a great point too, in terms of like, we want to model things for our employees, but also for clients.
Yeah.
Like just when a subcontractor has something going on and the client feels compelled to get all angry about it,
Yeah.
just kind of accepting the fact that, oh, this is a priority. The person's family was a priority. So sorry, client, if that affects your schedule, but
Yeah. Yeah, there's a lot of communication that probably has to happen along those lines too, and setting expectations with subcontractors, with vendors, and with clients as far as think life happens, and sometimes we have to be understanding about that. And the timeline can't always be so firm
Right.
because stuff happens.
Right. Christina, how about you? And then in a few minutes, we're going to open it up for questions from the panel or from the attendees. Sorry, not from the panel.
I don't have too much to add on this question, no brilliant insights, but just flexibility in working hours, which is good for people, whether mothers or, anyone taking care of, say, their parents or pets or health issues or whatever. But, I've really appreciated that, if I need to leave early or if I have a school thing in the middle of the day or if I have to do something, and then I can get my work done at night. And I think it just then trying to have good communication about when I'm around and when I can meet and talk, work with other people versus working on things by myself separately. But a standard, you must be here from 8 to 5 or something like that would not have worked for me. So I appreciate, flexibility is helpful, but then just communication for
communication about what your needs are and what to expect. I think that that's really a key message. So thank you for that. Do any of the panelists have anything that they want to add before we open it up for questions from the attendees?
I think it's just that whole idea of just growing into your self-advocating self. Like again, like Caitlin talked about, it's really easy to like advocate for not easy, but it comes more naturally to advocate for your kids,
Right.
and really sacrifice for your kids. But it's the oxygen mask thing. No one's gonna totally know that you're struggling inside if you hold it all inside. You do need to speak up and say, I need some things to change here. Or, you got to advocate. And it's hard.
Not only communicating that, but also in what you did, where you just recognize, like, this is not working for me. So I'm going to go ahead and make a change, like just having that recognition and that self-awareness that it's not working for your family.
But I don't know how aware of it I really was. It was just sort of like, well, let's ride this train. And in hindsight, it's like, oh man, that was totally the right thing. I guess just being open
Right.
to it. Yeah. There are a lot of questions dropping into the Q&A.
Oh, good. Thank y'all so much for your insights on all of these questions. I have learned so much from being involved in this entire exercise. So I'm excited to hear what the questions are.
I'm going to start with one of our questions that might be a smallest task in being a mother, but a vital one. The question is, did anyone ever outsource any home-related work like laundry, cleaning, tutoring, cooking, and find it helpful and or affordable?
I've outsourced house cleaning, and they come every other week. And this is like the last thing I would ever give up, I think, because my advice would be, if you can, to outsource things that you don't enjoy doing, which I don't enjoy doing that. So I'm very happy to have someone clean. If I could, I would probably also outsource laundry and cooking and pretty much everything. But right now it's just that.
All right, second question is what point, this is to all, at what point in your pregnancy did you disclose that you were pregnant to your employer?
When I was hired. I was pregnant when I got hired for my sort of small pre-babies stint. Um, it was also, I mean, I knew I had worked at this firm previously, so I kind of needed to be pretty upfront. Yeah.
I think I told them at 3 months. I think it was like the safe zone.
That's probably about when I got
You can start to see it.
Yeah. Everything's gonna hang out for a while. So
yeah. Plus you're in your second
Yeah, when I at 3 months, I think when we were telling everyone, we also told the employer at the same time.
I'm going to move on to the third question. Could you speak to a time that you had to advocate for yourself or have a difficult conversation? What advice would you give to a mother or expecting mother who needs to have difficult conversation to advocate for themselves? This is a heavy question.
Um, I would say I had asked to go part-time, which I didn't know was a thing in architecture. Like that was not a thing. You either worked for yourself and had your own schedule or you worked full-time. So I had asked and the answer wasn't no. So I think asking for help and being honest is the best thing you can do. I know that a lot of the reason why I felt comfortable to ask was because of the person that I was asking. So it really depends on who you're working with, but the answer could just be no, and then you move on. Or it's telling you something that you might need to leave or something. It's like you got to ask, you got to be upfront with what you at least think you need, and then go from there.
I do want to go back a little bit. We kind of jumped over the outsourcing help a little bit quick. I do want to also give a shout out to my husband, um, because his partnership in our family is critical. And some people might not always have that kind of relationship. If you don't, if it's not a very balanced home life, which is totally fine. I have lots of friends who they don't have that. But I would say like advocating to find your village and being open to your village for that help too, is really important because I think there's this stoicism that we feel like we have to have as mothers. And I know I carry a lot of that guilt of just like, I should be able to do it all. Um, and I still struggle with that, but it's certainly through the partnership with my husband. It's through we're lucky to have family in town, and get some of that help. And yeah, just really trust that it's not a sign of weakness to outsource some of this stuff. Another thing that we have in our family that I have found really helped is that when our kids were born, my husband and I made a shared email address. And that is where all of the family, school, sports, all of those emails go there so that we're both responsible for looking at them. And you leave something unread that is really important. And so it's not all on me to internalize, Lottie's got to get to this then, this is going on, this weekend. And it's been really invaluable again to just sort of like let the information be a little bit more communal and ask for that help.
And shared notes, if you have, I don't know if it's on all phones, but iPhone, we can do shared notes and we'll make like to-do lists. I share with my husband, and now my 15-year-old daughter, I also share it with her. So everybody knows what needs to happen, and then they can mark it off on the little to-do list once it's done. So it helps with the nagging.
Yeah, yeah.
Shared responsibility. I love that.
Talking about a responsibility in family, I'm going to transition on to the next question, which is more work family related. What is a specific thing that a colleague can do to help with unspoken challenges that mothers or expecting mothers experience in workplace? So
Anyone?
more of when you're an expecting mother or a mother, what kind of, support are you expecting, and how can somebody who is not a mother or is a mother or even a father or not a father or anybody can help?
I think just checking in with them. Sometimes all it takes is for somebody to ask you, like, hey, are you doing okay? Just checking in and make sure things are going okay, or if there's anything you can do to help. Like, how are you feeling about this coming up? Anything, just starting the conversation, checking in, giving the person an opportunity to speak up rather than having like maybe that person wants to talk to you, wants to be supportive, but just doesn't know how to say like, hey, I need help. Like just asking, how's it going?
I would say
And
too, as an employer, I try to be very aware of, like, I have an employee who has to go pick up her kids from school at a certain time. So I know that if I asked her for stuff during that time, she would still give it to me. So I just try to pay attention to what time it is before I start asking her for things or scheduling appointments. Like I know that that window of time that she's going to be picking up her kids from school. So I just don't, like, as an employer, I try to be sensitive to that, realizing that she wants to say yes to me, but it's going to be difficult for her to do that.
This might be the last question for today's panel discussion. What did you do at work to prepare for maternity leave so that you can detach from work and trust that everything would be handled by rest of your team?
I spent a long time just making ahead. Here's all the project numbers. Here's where to find everything. Here's all the contact info. Here's, I don't know. I did. And of course I had the time. Sometimes when it's so busy working, you can't do those organization things. And I didn't work right up until my due date. I was like, I'm going to focus on work and then I can let myself focus on other things. So I'm not trying to do both at once. So I think I stopped work maybe like 3 weeks before the expected due date, just so I wouldn't have that bump up of, oh, suddenly I have to stop. So I was very focused on, okay, I will get all the work things as organized as I can, and then I can focus on other things separately instead of both at once. I don't know if that helped, but that's what I did.
I would
Maybe
say too, just having a point person that you're going to delegate to. Like I've had builders who call me constantly asking questions, and I'm like, you know what? How about you call Kelly? She's the project manager. So just kind of diverting. And then he was always happy to call Kelly.
So, hi, I'm still here.
Hi, Jen.
Hi, an hour goes by really fast when we're talking about some pretty like dense topics like this, right? And so I just really want to thank all of you for sharing such intimate and personal stories and experience with, well, basically the world, because this is going to be on YouTube. But yeah, I am so proud to be part of this group and open up these types of conversations to make it normal, right? Like for me, I've gone through my own cycles of confusion, fear, shame, and amends. And there is a question that I want in the Q&A that I want to address really quickly about the licensure, tackling that. That is one of my cycles that I'm currently in right now. Like it's been 20 something years for me trying to tackle this. But like what Brett mentioned, this childhood mothering phase, it has gone by so quick. Yesterday I had a 2-year-old and now I have a 14-year-old. But yeah, I just want to thank everyone for being here. This is so awesome. I hope everybody who participated feels more comfortable than they did an hour ago to go out in the world and ask for what we need and keep continuing this conversation because it's really important. The more we talk about it, the more we normalize it, and the easier it's going to be for future generations to ask for what we need. Right? So thank you again, and I hope to see you at the next WiA event.
Thank you. And I think I speak for everybody that we're all happy to be contacted and go have coffee or, continue these conversations one-on-one with anyone who wants that.
I am totally down for that. All right.
Absolutely. Thank you all. Thank you to all of the panelists of subcommittee. This has been a phenomenal panel. So chime in and echo everything that's been said and thank you so much. And everyone have a wonderful rest of your day.
Thank you.
Thank you.
yes, and happy belated Mother's Day.
Of course. How did we leave that off? Happy Mother's Day.